some days you're up and other days you're down. Always tip the dealers and when your waitress comes around, cause sometimes you punt and other times you're round. And you might get cooler to flop the nuts when you sit down. The outcome of the hand don't mean that you made it, cause life's not about the result but more on how you played it. Hitting 8s, 9s, and 10s and all the painted faces. Every day you play is a win, even if you're mucking aces. Alright y'all, welcome back to the Mucking Aces Poker Vlog. This is episode 16. I'm KP and we're headed over to Matrix Casino. We're gonna hop in the 1-3 game and see if we can run it up here on Independence Day weekend. I want to wish everyone a happy 4th of July and we'll see you at the tables.
Alright, early on here in this session, I kick it off with Ace King in the small blind. I go ahead and bump it up to 20 once there's a few limpers here behind. I can tell that the wine is flowing, so it does look like it's going to be a good game here. The middle position limper does make the call, and he is the same player who had pocket 6s and hit the set of 6s in last week's episode, and also a player that I have not played with before, but is an OMC that is in the hijack, also makes the call. So with 54 in the pot, we go to see a flop. And the flop looks like it comes out pretty good for us, which shows a king in the window and then also a 9 and a 3. There are 2 spades on the board with the king of spades and the 9 of spades, also a diamond out there. So I'm going to want to make a continuation bet with my top pair and top kicker here to try and weed out any of those flush draws. So I do bump it up here and make it 40 more. When the player in middle position from the pocket 6's hand folds, the player who is in the hijack decides on a raise. He goes ahead and throws in a chip for $100, announcing that he wants to raise it up there. So I gladly oblige with his raise here and decide to ship it all in for his last 120 or so, and we go to see a turn card which comes out the 5 of clubs and also a river which comes out the 8 of spades, and unfortunately for me he turns over deuce 3 of spades, so we lose that one there. A little while later, we do get a chance for redemption in the cutoff with pocket queens after we get sucked out on by the short stack river flush. In these 1-3 games, I have been finding that many of the players will only 3-bet their premium holdings. So I decide here only to make it 10 to try and keep the small blind and big blind in the hand. Unfortunately, that doesn't end up happening, but 2 players do end up making the call. Middle position player and the hijack player both decide to make the call. So we do go 3 ways to the flop with roughly about $87 in the pot. We see a flop that comes out okay for us here in this instance. It is a jack, a 10, and a 4. It is a rainbow board, so I'm going to make a continuation bet here with my premium pair, which is an overpair to the board. With both players checking on this flop, I decide on a sizing of $45, which is roughly a half pot size bet. Unfortunately, here in hindsight, I'm realizing that I probably should have just checked here and let the players catch up a little bit. But happy to take this one down as they both fold. A little while later, I pick up ace deuce of spades in the hijack. With the suited ace deuce, I'm going to go ahead and continue here with a bet. I make it $10 to try and entice some players to come along and play against my suited connectors with the ace deuce of spades in the hijack. And this is what ends up happening as the big blind player and the player who is in middle position end up making the call. So we go 3 ways to the flop with about $42 in the pot, and the effective stack at about $200 with the player in middle position having about 200 behind. The flop comes out great for us, ace, deuce, jack. So we have top and bottom pair here. And on this board, I'm going to try and fire and make it 10 more to keep both players in, as I'm pretty confident that I have the best hand here. Both players end up making the call, and we go to that turn card, which comes out the 10 of spades, and I go ahead and continue with my story by firing out once again. After both players check to me and I make a bet of $10, the player in the big blind folds his hand, and the player who is in middle position decides on a re-raise. So he re-raises to $40, and I immediately make the call. So we go with about 132 in the pot to a river card. That river card comes out the 8 of diamonds. And while this does bring a straight draw out there, which I completely do not think that this player would show up with, I decide to shove him all in for his last $50 or so, and he goes into the tank for just a moment, but ends up throwing his cards into the muck. I thought he was priced into the hand, but I guess he wasn't, and got up shortly thereafter. Next hand of note, I'm in middle position with ace 10 of hearts, and this one was pretty straightforward here. I bump it up here in middle position and do get a couple of callers. So we go 3 ways to a flop here, and the flop comes out with top pair here for me, and it is a 10, a 6, and a 3 with 2 spades. With top pair on the board and top kicker, I'm going to make that continuation bet, and the player who is in the cutoff decides to come along as the player who is in the hijack decides to fold once again. So we're going heads up with $59 in the pot to a turn card, which comes out the 5 of clubs. First act here in middle position, I'm going to continue firing here, so I throw out another bet and I make it 25 more to go. My opponent in this hand decides that that's too rich for his blood and decides to throw his cards into the muck, just in time for us to pick up rockets, one of each color here in middle position. And I'm going to ask you to hit that like button if you are enjoying this 4th of July episode so far. After a couple of folds, I decide to slow play my aces and throw out a bet of $10, and the player next to act after me in middle position +1 is going to throw out a bet of $30. So I am going to back raise here, and I make it 106 in the pot to go, and he thinks about it for just a little bit before making the call after I raise $60 on top of his original re-raise. I definitely have him covered here in this spot, and we go heads up to a flop, which comes out 10-5-5 with 2 diamonds. Here for me, I don't think this really changes much. If he has a 5, then so be it, but with his re-raise, I don't think that he is going to have any piece of this board, and I go ahead and lead out for roughly a pot size bet and make it 271 in the pot and see if he wants to come along. In this 1-3 game, I think this action is very strong. I could have made a smaller size bet here as a continuation, as he is going to fold any of his draws to a really larger size bet if he did not catch much of this board, and that's exactly what happens. He stops to think about it. I show him the aces to show him that I was not raising him like. In hindsight, I guess I could have made a smaller bet to the shorter stack. A little while later here, I'm on the button with 8-10 of spades. After a few limpers to me, I decide to bump it up here, 10 more to go, to see if anyone wants to come along and see a flop, but unfortunately everyone folds. But I guess it's okay for me to scoop here with that gap suited connector, so we move on to the next hand. Then after a donk on the flop with pocket deuces while I'm in MP2, I think I make a good fold when the flop comes out ace, queen, jack. It is a rainbow board, but somebody donks out for roughly about $50 into a $40 pot. So I'm going to fold this one and move on to the next hand and hopefully get into a better spot. I was just trying to set mine here in this situation with my pocket deuces. Here I'm back in the small blind with pocket queens, so we get the Lady Liberties here. There is an under the gun limp and also a middle position limp, and we see some great news. The player who is in the hijack decides to bump it up. He makes it 25 more to go. So once it gets to me in the small blind, I'm going to bump it up here myself, and I make it about 90 more. I thought I had 100 in my stack, but I had just been mixing it up here a little bit and just took down a pot. So I thought I had a full 100 stack of chips, but unfortunately, at any rate, it was about 125 in the pot, and the player who is in the hijack decides to make the call for roughly 86 more. He really only has a couple $100 in his stack left, and I do have him covered. So the effective stack is about 200 here that I can take down, but we end up going heads up to the flop with about $186 in the pot, and the flop is going to come out here pretty good for us as far as having an overpair to the board goes. It is a jack, an 8, and a 4. There are 2 spades out there on the board, so I'm going to go ahead and slow down on this one. I think that that was a decent move to try and let him catch up, but I wasn't necessarily afraid of the flush draw at this point. But I do check, and he decides to check back. So we're still heads up to a turn with about 185 in the pot, and the turn card comes out the 9 of hearts. So there is a straight draw out there, and that means I'm going to go for max value here. He has about $120 left in his stack, so I decide to flick in the chips for an all-in and see if he does want to come along for his remaining stack, and he then goes well into the tank, and I'm just going to speed this one up here for you. He decides to make the fold, and he says that he folded pocket 10s. So I'm going to scoop this decent sized pot. Wish I could have got it all there, but unfortunately didn't. But I'm happy to scoop this pot with the pocket queens, of course. I guess there was a little bit of misvalue here in this hand and in a few of the previous ones. Definitely looking to improve on that part of my game, especially in these short stack cash games. So I do pick up pocket 6s in the cutoff, and the flop comes out ace king 10 with 2 diamonds. So I do have to fold to a considerably large overbet once it does check around, and we get to see a turn that is a queen of spades. So after that checks around again, we do get to see the river card, which comes out a complete blank as a 2 of clubs. But unfortunately, I do just have to fold my pocket pair here, as it did seem pretty value-y as the player donked out on this board with a bunch of overcards, but I did get to see a lot of free cards, and once I muck my hand, they do show that they had a king, so I would have lost. Players at these low stakes do tend to do some very weird things. In the last notable hand of the night, I'm in the small blind and I pick up ace 5 of diamonds. Usually here in this position, I would 3-bet this one. So once it gets to me, I'm going to bump it up. So I do make it 15 more to go, and I do get 1 caller in this position. So we go heads up to a flop, and that flop comes out great for us. It's an ace in the window with a 6 and a 5 with 2 spades out there. Once again, I could have probably slowed down here on this board and just checked on the flop with my top pair, but usually these players are only playing their strong aces, so I did want to try and get some value and see where I was at here with the top pair and the kicker, which was a mediocre kicker to say the least. So I throw out a bet of $30 here after the flop comes out, and the player who is in middle position decides on a fold. So after this hand, I scoop and rack up here and call it a night. I want to thank everyone for watching and hope to see you soon on the next one.
All right, y'all, that's it for episode 16 of the Mucking Aces Poker Vlog. I appreciate everyone dropping a like on the video. Thanks so much for watching. Want to wish everyone a happy Independence Day. Thanks so much for all the new subscribers that we've been getting. Definitely looking forward to meeting some of y'all, and I really appreciate it once again. We got into the game for $300 and we're out for roughly $1,200. I'll have the numbers up on the screen here next to me, and I didn't miss a big hand there. It was a pretty big pot at the end for about $1,000. I had ace-8 of clubs and I flopped a flush, and I got it all in against a king high straight. So I appreciate everyone for dropping a like on the video once again, and I look forward to seeing y'all on the next one. Peace.